It is 6 p.m. and we will start our city council work session. We have one item on our agenda this evening. That is a review of comments from the stakeholder workshop on the 2024 ICC Building Codes with Brian Scott and Courtney Capello. Brian, you're up first.
Hey, thank you very much, Mayor. Courtney and I are back. Courtney's sitting in the corner wisely. So we have a PowerPoint presentation for you tonight. When Justin gets that fired up, we'll start going through it. I will just kind of lead the discussion tonight, where we're at, process we went through for the stakeholders review, and the kind of next steps. And then Courtney's here to kind of answer the really difficult technical questions that are frankly above my pay scale. So, okay, next slide, please. So where are we at? So we started this journey, feels like a long time ago, but it was really, I think we kind of got working on it seriously back in the fall of last year. We had a work session with you all to kind of introduce the building codes on October 15th. After that, we kind of went away and we actually did drafting. So we spent quite a bit of time drafting the ordinances that would adopt the codes and then doing a little bit further research. In particular, we were kind of watching that Senate Bill 418 that was sort of floating through the legislation at the time. On April 29th, we came back and we reviewed the building codes themselves and the proposed amendments. Then on June 17th, we had a stakeholders workshop to gather feedback. So that was held virtually at 9 o'clock in the morning. And we invited a number of stakeholders to attend that. We invited you all, mission boards and commission members. We invited builders, developers, architects, and contractors that have done work in Mission in the past few years. We invited representatives, kind of key stakeholder groups, including Climate Action KC, Green Building Council, Metropolitan Energy Center, and the Kansas City Home Builders Association. And we probably had about, I guess, maybe 7 or 8 folks on the call. Maybe kind of around that number, sort of representative group across the board of all those areas, all the stakeholders. So we are here tonight to kind of provide feedback or provide a review or summary of that discussion, that feedback. And then on June 8th, if all goes well, we'll bring everything back for a final review at the Community Development Committee. July 8th, excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong, yep, July 8th, yes. And then July 17th adoption, and then October 1st implementation. Okay, so tonight's agenda. We're going to review really the key recommendations for the IBC, the IRC, and the IECC. So there's quite a few codes. I'll show those to you in a minute, but we're really going to focus in on those 3 tonight. And then again, we'll kind of go over a summary of the feedback that we got at the workshop, discussion, and the next steps. So the building codes. As we all know, the codes are developed by the International Code Council, which is a nonprofit organization made up of building officials, architects, engineers, and those in the construction industry. The ICC is continually updating the codes to reflect enhanced safety measures, emerging trends in construction, and best practices. And the new codes are released on a 3-year cycle. So in the Kansas City metropolitan area, we typically adopt every 6 years or every other cycle. So the last set of codes that a lot of the cities adopted was the 2018. And now 6 years later, we're all looking at the 2024 codes to adopt. Historically, we've all kind of met as a group, most of the building officials, to discuss the codes, review those, and consider any amendments that we want to make to those. And we kind of do it as a group so that we have consistency across the communities, and design professionals and the engineers and the contractors kind of know from one community to the next what to expect with the codes. However, we've seen in the past few years that a lot of governing bodies, a lot of communities are really kind of interested in adopting codes that reflect more of the values of that particular community and the policy initiatives that they want to see put forth. And probably the best example of that would be what happened in Kansas City, Missouri, where they adopted 2021 energy codes, which was considered to be a very aggressive energy conservation code. But they wanted to do that because they were very interested in climate change and wanted to see the codes kind of drive forth a lot of those kind of policy initiatives that they were interested in reducing the effects of climate change. Next slide, please. So what building codes is Mission considering? We're considering pretty much the whole family of the 2024 International Building Codes. So that would be the IBC and the residential code, which we'll talk a little bit more in detail about tonight. Fuel gas code, mechanical code, existing building code, property maintenance, fire code, and then energy conservation code. We have two new codes that we'll be considering as part of the adoption process, and that's the International Pool and Spa Code and then the Accessibility Code. And each of these codes will be adopted as a separate ordinance, and they become a part of Chapter 500. Each code's kind of a separate article under Chapter 500 of the Municipal Code. So again, as I said tonight, we're focusing our attention primarily on the IBC and the IRC and the IECC. The IBC is the code that really governs the design, construction, and safety of commercial and multifamily buildings. So those are kind of the bigger buildings that we see around town. The International Residential Code, as one would suspect, governs the construction of detached 1- and 2-family homes and townhomes. And then the International Energy Conservation Code governs the energy efficiency of buildings for both residential and commercial. So getting into the IBC, and a lot of this is going to be very familiar for you. So we have proposed adding a section for license requirement, and that basically stipulates that anybody that does construction in the city of Mission must have a Johnson County contractor's license. And we also proposed amending section 105.8 notice orders and work hours to allow work only during the following times. That'd be Monday through Friday, 7 to 6, Saturday, 8 to 6, and then no work on Sundays. And then finally amend section 109.4, commencing work before issuance of a permit. And that would simply state that any work that's done before the issuance of a permit is subject to a penalty that's double the permit fee. We propose adding section 105.3.6 regarding stormwater pollution prevention, simply stating that anybody that does construction in the city is required to get a land disturbance permit and to submit a stormwater pollution prevention plan for erosion control prior to issuance of the permit. And then there's a section 10.6, which pertains to physical security of a dwelling unit to prevent unlawful entry. And that's duplicated in the IRC as R333.1. And that really gets into extra framing around the doors, heavier hinges, extra framing around the windows, a light at each entry point, really to provide extra measure of security for those points in and out of the home and to prevent unlawful entry.
Brian, can I ask a question about the work hours? And I think our current practice is no work on Sunday, but I know that came up from some of the comments. And was that just a carryover, or did staff have like particular reasons to disallow work on
Next
Sunday?
slide right here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yep, timing's perfect. So summary of comments on the 2024 IBC amendments. So Mr. Wingert, who's here with us this evening, Mission resident, had asked that very question. And there is an exception under the proposed language in the ordinance that would allow for a homeowner and occupant to do work after hours or on Sundays. And this is really kind of in keeping with the current provision that we have in Chapter 500, and it kind of mirrors that provision that we have currently, but it's actually in the building codes. So it's kind of a little bit of a belt and suspenders approach, but
Okay.
yes, a homeowner can do work after hours on Sunday.
Is there a reason for preventing other other than homeowners from doing
It-
work on?
Really, this is the IBC, so it's
Okay,
for commercial
but
buildings
that
and
piece, okay, just on the
multifamily
commercial.
buildings. And we've had issues in the past, especially some of our multifamily projects where they fall behind schedule. They're there Sunday working and they're banging away and they're playing their music loud. And we get complaints from the residents of the nearby neighborhoods. And so we have to contact the superintendents on Monday and, hey, don't do that. And we've kind of wised up with some of our more current projects like Mission Beverly over here. We told the superintendent up front, no loud music, no outside activities after hours. If you want to work inside where it's kind of away from everybody, that's fine, but no outside activities. Okay, then Mr. Wingert also had a comment about the stormwater pollution prevention plan. His question was primarily, does it apply to properties that are 1 acre or smaller? And again, this is the IBC, so this is primarily for larger commercial projects and multifamily projects that are being at multiple acres. Again, this provision actually reflects what's in our current code under Chapter 500 pertaining to land disturbance permits and stormwater pollution prevention plans. So we require everybody to get a land disturbance permit when they do any kind of demolition or site disturbance. For those that have property over 1 acre, they're required to pay a fee. For those that are under 1 acre, there's no fee, but we still want to know about the activity that's going on. And they're still required, they don't have to necessarily provide a stormwater prevention plan, but they do have to do erosion control. So it's silt fencing. It's the wattles that go in the storm sewer areas. So those kind of things we want to see on even the smaller properties, the projects.
You take it as they're separated or counted as a big
Yeah, they actually applied for a lot split.
Okay,
So they're now 2 separate houses, 2 separate sites. But yeah,
because with the erosion and everything, it's a different story. And
yeah, they
that's-
should still have all the silt fencing up. So we've been checking on that. Yeah, and we discovered a property on Reed's the other day that didn't have silt fencing up. So we contacted the contractor, saying you need to get your silt fencing up, especially with all the rains that we've had this spring. So yeah, we should be watching that. Okay, so that's it for the IBC. For the IRC, this is the International Residential Code. Really kind of the driver with this was Senate Bill 418, the By Right Housing Development Act. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time. We've gone through this before, but I wanted to kind of review this again with you all. The intent of this act, which was eventually adopted by the state legislature and signed into law by Governor Kelly. The intent of this act is to promote the development of housing by streamlining the residential development approval process in order to facilitate construction of additional housing in the state of Kansas. So it's applicable to single-family dwellings, townhomes, and ADUs. It requires a 30-day review for construction permits. So if somebody submits a construction permit for a single-family home, we have to review it and issue a permit within 30 days, which is not an issue for us because we usually do that in about 2 or 3 weeks. Single-family residential use is permitted in any residentially zoned district. And we'll kind of work on implementing that as part of our zoning code update. Rezoning to single-family does not require written notice to the property owners within 200 feet and is exempt from a protest petition like other rezonings are. But the real applicable component of Senate Bill 418 for us tonight are the construction requirements for single-family residents that are less than 2,500 square feet. So that simply states that any home that's less than 2,500 square feet of total livable floor area or gross floor area minus the garage and basements and constructed on each resident's own separate lot or parcel within its own individual legal description, all political subdivisions shall allow the following. Item number 1, use of any of the following at the discretion, I have that highlighted, of the political subdivision. the 2018 edition of the IRC, the 2018 edition of the IRC is previously adopted, or the 2018 edition of the IRC as another jurisdiction. That's us. Yeah, the city or county or yeah. So going on to the next slide. So what we're proposing is that for adoption of the 2024 International Residential Code, we would amend section R 101.2, which is a scope. That's like one of the very first sections that you see when you open up the code book. And it stipulates that this code pertains to the construction of single-family homes, townhomes, detached bi-family homes. And then it lists some exceptions. So what we're proposing is adding exception number 1. New construction of any single-family dwelling that is A, less than 2,500 square feet of total livable floor area or gross floor area minus garages and basements in size, and B, constructed on a single parcel or lot with its own legal description may follow provisions of the unamended 2018 edition of the International Residential Code. So what that's simply saying is they're working out of the book, the unamended version of the book. So there's no amendments. We're not proposing that we keep the old 2018 that we currently have on the books right now. They would just be simply working out of the book.
And that's simply to align us with Bill 418.
Yeah, it's complying with Bill 418.
Brian, can I make a note just because you mentioned the zoning code update and compliance with SB 418? Is there a way when we're drafting that where if that was repealed or changed, there would be kind of fallback provisions in our code? I'm thinking in particular, their requirement that any residential zone allow for single family, because I think that's actually an anti-housing measure, right? You're potentially going to take a multifamily parcel and say someone can build a, 5,000 square foot single family home on it, which is going to decrease the amount of housing. So I'm just thinking about as we work through the zoning code update, if we could have some fallbacks or provisions that would get struck out kind of automatically if that legislation was to change.
Yeah, I'll have to give that some thought, but yeah.
I think we could also look at performance requirements that are not subject to the chicanery going on here in some of those zones that would be unlikely to be developed in a single family home if they were developed on those parcels.
But yeah, a bit of an aside, but since you mentioned the zoning code, I did just want to flag that.
That legislation has been a real head scratcher for all of us, and I wouldn't be surprised
Agree.
if it's revisited again next legislative session and kind of cleaned up a little bit. So next slide. So you've seen this before. We've had 14 new homes built in Mission since 2018. 7 of those have been 2,500 square feet or less, so about half. So about half would be affected by 418. Then we have some additional provisions on heat detectors and garages and then residential driveways, in particular allowing for impervious block paver stones or turf blocks or anything like that to allow for more pervious surface. Okay, and we also have a provision for basically prohibiting drainage onto adjacent property. So requiring a gutter, sump, pumps, and drains not discharge less than 10 feet from the property line. And then finally, this is kind of getting back to the real nut of all of this. We're proposing to amend table N 1106.5, which would be R 406.5 in the IRC. The maximum energy rating index option would be 60. So the energy rating index is the measurement of the overall energy efficiency of a home or structure. And sometimes we hear the term HERS, which actually stands for Home Energy Rating Systems, which is a proprietary version of ERI. So those two terms are kind of interchangeable, ERI or HERS, you hear that quite a bit. They're on a scale from 0 to 100, and 100 is bad, 0 is great. So the lower the number, the more energy efficient that home is. The IRC unamended is at a 53 for the ERI rating, and we're proposing 60. And I'll get a little bit more into that with the next slide. So, as I stated, Mission's current amended 2018 IRC, the one that's currently in the books today, has an ERI of 80, which in your handouts at 70. I caught that error an hour ago. So it's actually 80. That's what's on the books today. The unamended 2018 IRC has an ERI of 62. So with proposing that new homes that are 2,500 square feet or less be built under the unamended 2018 IRC, they would be built to an ERI of 62. Now, staff is proposing adopting the 2024 IRC with an ERI of 60. And the current code unamended would be 53. So there's been a lot of discussion about this amongst the cities in Johnson County. Overland Park just adopted their IRC a couple of weeks ago. And their 2018 IRC had an ERI of 68. They adopted the 2024 IRC with an ERI of 63. And they propose using their current 2018 IRC to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 418. So there's kind of leave it as is. Some of the bigger communities like Lenexa, Olathe, Shawnee, their current 2018 ERI is 80. They're not proposing to adopt the 2024. So they're going to stay with what they have for 2018. Leewood and Prairie Village have a lower ERI for their 2018 IRC. That's 62. They're also not proposing to adopt the 2024. Westwood currently has a 2018 IRC, or they did, with an amended ERI of 80. They adopted the 2024 IRC with an ERI of 60. To be compliant with Senate Bill 418, they recently amended that, so they're now going to keep the 2018 IRC to be compliant with Senate Bill 418. So they still have the 2024, but to be compliant with Senate Bill 418, we're kind of readopting their 2018 as it was.
So when you say as is, it's the version of 2018 that they adopted as opposed to the by the book that we're going for. Okay.
Correct. And then Roland Park is still, they have not adopted their 2024 IRC. I think they're kind of waiting for the rest of us to see what will happen.
Brian, is there a penalty involved if you're not seeking a lower rating? What,
No, there's no penalty.
is there an encouragement? It's kind of confusing in terms of what the Senate bill says and what we're doing relative to, we're trying to keep going down and others are staying at 80.
Because frankly, others are very nervous about what the construction community is saying. So the construction community is going to want that higher ERI because it's less expensive to build to. And everybody will tell you, even Courtney will tell you, the 2018 code is a good code. They like it. They work with it well. And
Which was already 62.
yeah,
So
unamended
close.
62.
Yeah.
But you know, when it was adopted back in 2018, most everybody adopted 80.
Brian, can I make a point? Two thoughts on that. So one, I know we have the stakeholder meetings and I think that that's valuable, but I think we should keep in mind that the code itself is already a compromise code, right? You already have a lot of different diverse stakeholders at the table, including the construction committee, the community, right? Both multifamily and single family are part of that code process. Is that right? In terms of how the
Yeah, it's-
codes are adopted. And then I think the other point too, looking especially at where Leewood and Prairie Village is, I think we would all like to see more affordable single-family homes built. I unfortunately don't think we're going to see them in Mission because the land costs are so high. And so if you're looking at a 62 in Prairie Village, that's clearly not deterring single-family construction, in Prairie Village. And I don't think we're talking about anywhere in the city where someone is going to be considering building what we would consider to be affordable single-family homes, where the small marginal cost increase of complying with the lower HERS rating would have a, meaningful impact potentially. I mean, I don't know if, and you talk about the single-family homes that have been built since 2018. Do you think that's a fair read of what we're seeing in terms of single-family development? We're not seeing affordable homes, right?
yeah, I think, most of the homes in Prairie Village are expensive.
But I mean, the new builds here too.
Yeah.
Right, are
Relative-
$700,000 plus, generally speaking.
Not as expensive as the one in Prairie Village.
Sure,
Yeah.
but expensive, not what people would consider to be affordable
Yeah.
homes,
But also,
right?
I think what's important is like, even if we were not to try to get like all within the same zone of low sixties, I don't think that us saying, okay, we'll stick with 80 actually encourages anyone to come to us anyway. So we're just saying like, we're not here for the resilience. We're here for a short-term benefit that won't, for the most part, apply to anyone who's trying to build here anyway. And so like, I think that if we were to also just be like 80 it is, I think that we do a disservice to the other cities around us in the work that they're trying to do that we also agree with. And so like, yeah.
Yeah, I think 80 is easy. Anybody could do 80. To move to 60 is a bit of a challenge, which is a little bit of why I was kind of proposing we go the unamended 2018 to be compliant with Senate Bill 418, because that basically forces the home builder now to build at 62. So we're being more consistent with ultimately what we're trying to achieve is that's lowering that ERI rating, getting that higher energy efficiency by lowering that rating.
Is there anyone who could tell us how cumbersome it is to make that 2-point difference?
Well, I think Mr. Wingert will tell you in a minute.
Between 60 and 62,
Yeah.
you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and then, to go to 53, that's probably a big leap from 80 all the way down to 53. But I think to go from 80 to 60 and be kind of consistent with generally the rest of the building community, especially in Northeast Johnson County, seems reasonable. That's my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear what it takes to get to these different numbers. I assume the challenge is mainly around air sealing and insulation.
Could you give us just a few of the elements that are the drivers behind the higher versus
Yeah,
solar? How much is?
we'll get a little bit more into as I get further into the presentation.
Right.
So next slide. Sort of a summary of the comments we got in the 2024 IRC. Mr. Koenigsdorf, who's a builder here in our community, has been building some townhome development projects at 58th and Knoll. He builds quite a few single-family homes in Prairie Village. He expressed a concern with achieving an ERI or HERS score of 60. And he said that he builds a lot of his homes with more insulation, tighter duct sealing, energy efficient lighting, kind of all the things that are required in the Energy Conservation Code. And when he does his blower door test, his HERS score invariably comes out around 63, 62, somewhere in there. So you can't quite achieve that 60.
But we also know he's building in Prairie Village, so.
Well, yeah. Yeah, he's not sure if it's just the company that's doing the scores or if there's something missing, but that was his comment at least. And then Mr. Wingert asked if builders follow the unamended 2018 IRC, would they also follow the other 2018 edition of the codes? And we talk about these codes being like a family. They all kind of work together. Although we have 12 or 14 different codes, they all kind of work together. So I think in that case, Courtney and I have discussed it. We feel that if somebody were to build to the 2018 edition of the code for the IRC, we would just kind of expect them to follow the other 2018 codes as well. So that'd be the 2018 plumbing and energy conservation code, just to kind of stay consistent. And that builder kind of knows that family of codes and what they're building to.
Brian, doesn't the IRC incorporate those codes by reference? So that's not really something we have to worry about. It just sort of, if you're reading the 2018 IRC, it says XYZ, and then go look at the 2017 NEC, right? So seems like they've thought of that for us.
Yeah, I really don't want to have two separate codes on the books. That's really confusing. So I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible. Then the Kansas Gas Service expressed concern about higher credits given for electric components that have an unfair advantage over gas components. So if you really get into the weeds and you really start reading the codes, they talk about credits for particular appliances, furnace, air conditioner, other components of the home. It is a bit confusing, a little over my head, but I will note that Overland Park did amend their 2024 IRC to correct this, kind of what they consider to be an imbalance.
Yeah.
So are we doing that?
I would propose that we do. Yeah, I think that's an easy fix.
I would, yeah, I'm not here to take their suggestions at face value. I'd like to see what Overland Park did and hear from our attorneys on this one. I think a lot of what they ask in their submission is far beyond what's necessary to comply.
Well, especially the additional appendices that they just don't like from a policy perspective, like that really have nothing to do with natural gas, like solar ready, EV charging ready, like that has nothing to do really with natural gas. And I think too, I mean, and again, I agree with Ben that maybe getting city council's COUN-SEL's opinion on this would be good, because I don't think their read of the legislation is right in terms of, violating the Kansas, what is it called? Fair
Energy Choice Act.
Energy Choice Act. If you read that, the plain language and the testimony at the time, it was in response to states who were banning like gas entirely. And it's about, as I read it, it's about utility access, and you can't keep people from having the right to, connect to a gas utility. And so I think they're trying to use that as a much bigger weapon than it really is.
Made that pretty, it looked transparently so to me based on their
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but you think that she had a
Point, or she's overreacting.
I think the Kansas Gas Service, I think that they have a specific policy take, which is neither,
accurate.
well, no, it's a policy position. So whether a policy position is accurate or inaccurate, I would think it may not be aligned with our values that we've expressed on, the climate and everything. But I think where they are saying that some of this is at risk of violating the state statute, I don't think they're right on that. But I would like to get our city attorney's take, or other, if Overland Parks looked at this, because I think they're trying to make that legislation a lot broader than it actually is.
Yeah, I've got detailed thoughts if we want to go into that.
So that's enough of the IRC. Well, I'm just gonna try to get through this so we can, I think a lot of your discussion, a lot of your points will be kind of brought up further along in my presentation. So the International Energy Efficiency Code, which is the IECC, or the energy codes we commonly refer to, covers a wide range of factors that affect how energy a building uses over time. At its core, it's focused on the building envelope, which includes the insulation levels in the walls, roofs, and floors, as well as the performance of windows and doors. It also addresses air sealing and leakage of ductwork, mechanical systems, how energy efficient they are, energy efficiency of water heating systems, and the energy efficiency of lighting, and often requires high efficiency fixtures and controls. And again, there's a lot of focus on the ERI and the HERS rating with the IECC.
And Brian, generally speaking, and maybe you're going to get into it more, but to tie it back to Debbie's question, my understanding is that the HERS rating, the main driver of that is that building envelope, right?
Yeah, so they want to make sure that the building is sealed. There's kind of a wrap around the building that prevents moisture from getting in, or wind, or air getting out. They want to make sure that all the ductwork inside the building is sealed so that when the furnace is blowing air through the ductwork, it's not leaking out at the joints. A lot of times in older homes, even newer homes, my home's about 25 years old, and I took off the vent one day and you basically just see the cavity inside. So the air is just kind of getting blown up into the cavity of the wall. So the IECC, the 2024, is wanting to address that by eliminating that. There's no wall cavities to be used for air exchange.
And so the countervailing cost argument that I think was flagged in the packet is that a lower HERS rating should reduce your energy costs as a homeowner, right? Or building operator if it's commercial, or yeah.
Yep, there's an upfront cost, because there is more cost with that, but in the long run, it's going to reduce your energy cost. So we kept the IECC proposed amendments pretty simple. And we're talking about amending 107 for the commercial as well as the residential requirement of special inspections, tests, and inspection agencies. This really gets down to that HERS rating. So what we're basically saying is you have 3 performance paths or ways to achieve the energy efficiency rating. You have a prescriptive, which you're just following the code by the letter of the book. You have performance, where you're looking at the overall energy performance of the building, and you're looking at opportunities where you can take credits from certain areas. You can kind of come up with a creative way to achieve that energy rating. And that's really in particular for architects that are designing interesting buildings that have big windows and open spaces and things like that. And then there's simply the HERS rating, and that's just a blower door test. You're going through, you're kind of doing all the insulation work and the duct tightening and all of that. And then you're hiring a company to come in and do a blower door test. And they're going to hand you a certificate that says, yeah, you've achieved 60 or 62 or whatever the energy rating is. That's the easiest for us as staff, because we can basically look at that and certify it and say, yep, good to go. So, and then we're proposing, as with the IRC, an energy rating index or a HERS of 60. Here's the fun part. So we're also proposing adopting some appendices from the IECC. So there are a list of appendices at the back of the code book. And the appendices really kind of help you to provide additional tools to reach a higher level of energy conservation or achieve overall energy conservation goals. They really kind of advance the energy measures and alternative approaches to give community a lot more flexibility. So on to the next slide. Our recommended appendices that we're proposing is Appendix C, B, and RB, which are solar-ready provisions for commercial and residential buildings. This is simply would be roofs to be built to support additional weight for solar panels. Roofs have space for solar panels, so don't take up your roof with all this mechanical equipment, but provide some space for the solar panel in the future. Shading is a factor too. So don't put that space for the solar panel in a place that's not going to get a lot of sun exposure, like the north side of the building. Let's put that more to the south side of the building or the west side of the building where you get more sun exposure. Also, a conduit or electrical work provided from the roof through the building to the electrical panel, then a larger electrical panel to handle the additional circuits that may be required in the future for installation of the solar panels. We're proposing adoption of Appendix C, G, R, E, and that's for electric vehicle charging infrastructure for commercial and residential buildings. So many kind of the same components as above. A conduit provided connecting the EV spaces to the electrical panel in the building, larger electrical panel to allow for additional circuits, and then a percentage of the parking spaces to be EV ready and a percentage to actually have EV charging stations. And then finally, Appendix RK, which is electric-ready residential building provisions. This simply requires that new home construction be equipped with electrical outlets for the stove, the clothes dryer, and then wiring for the hot water heater. So a lot of older homes are going to have gas stoves, and they can certainly, with a new home, put a gas line in if the owner wants to have a gas stove. We're just simply saying also put an electrical outlet if somebody ever in the future wants to switch out that gas stove for an electric stove. And the same with the dryer and the same with the hot water heater. So homeowners have an option of either choosing gas or electric.
Let me ask a question. So I'm trying, because I saw the comments from the gas person and they seem to make sense to me. You're saying that there needs to be two. They can either have, they can have the gas or the electric. We're requiring both. You're not saying
We're not
that if
necessarily
they have,
requiring both. We're just saying that we're requiring electrical. If the builder wants to put in gas, that's fine too. We're not necessarily discriminating against gas. We're not saying they can't put gas in. They can
But-
put gas in.
but you're not requiring gas like you are electric, correct?
No. And a lot of pretty much everybody has a gas, furnace or a gas, hot water heater.
Yeah.
As I say, a lot of people choose to have gas stoves. They like that feature of a gas stove. All we're saying is if you're going to opt for that, if you're going to build a new home and put in a gas stove or a gas water heater, also provide an electrical option.
That doesn't seem to be discriminatory to you.
No, because you can have gas. I mean, it's not required, but you can have gas if you want. And most homes are built with the gas water heater. So we're just saying provide electrical line in the future if somebody ever wants to switch out their gas water heater for electrical.
Let me again ask this question. So why is it that you're asking them to put in electrical if you give them the option of gas if they want? Why are you variable with gas and not with electric?
I think that, not being anyone who wrote any of these things or necessarily an expert, I think that gas is kind of a default, and so you don't have to provide incentive for it.
Why do we have to provide incentives for either?
Well, the cost of retrofitting the electrical versus doing it in the first instance is way higher, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I'm not, help me understand why just having gas is a detriment.
Well,
Well-
some will make the argument that gas gives off fumes, which can be a health issue. I'm surprised that no one's really brought that up, but that's been one of the complaints or concerns about having gas stove or gas fireplace or anything like that, is that you'll have that pilot light on all the time, and that pilot light can be giving off fumes that could be harmful. But
Can I, mind if I offer a little bit?
No, can we hold public comments till the end if that works? Just, yeah. But
yeah, it's just really I think as Councilman Champosi said, that's the alternative, the kind of the baseline is to provide gas for your water heater, your furnace. As like some people want to have a stove, gas stove, so the builder will put that in. But in the future, a future homeowner may want to have a different alternative, especially for the stove. I don't like the gas stove, I want to take that out, but now I have to provide all this wiring to get the electrical stove in. So that's really kind of the premise behind that.
Here's my take on you got to put a wire and a conduit in the wall. We're required not to, prohibit, discriminate against, restrict, limit, impair, or have the effect thereof an end use customer's use of a utility service such as natural gas. Nothing about this appendix does that. To put a gas stove in, you have to choose to install a gas pipe, whether we pass this appendix or not.
Interesting, but I don't see it that way. it does seem discriminatory to me. I feel like you are advocating for electricity. That's just my feeling.
I am. I'm not advocating that we pass legislation that violates the Kansas Energy Choice Act, but I am advocating for the use of electricity. In order to comply with that statute, if, for example, our attorney suggests that we should have people install an electrical conduit and a piece of gas pipe, I'm willing to entertain that.
Okay, so moving on to particular the IECC appendices regarding the electrical vehicle charging stations. This is the table that's straight out of the appendices, but we have gone through and reduced the percentages for parking spaces for each of these group areas. And then the type of EVS space is the actual electric charging unit that you would plug your vehicle into. So that's the first column. EV ready spaces would be basically all the equipment except the charging station itself. And then EV capable spaces would be like the conduit and kind of some of the basic equipment, but not necessarily the mount to hang the charging unit on or anything like that. So we're proposing lowering the percentage requirements for the parking spaces from what is in the current code. And so those are the percentages that we're considering.
And I just want to confirm, because I've heard some concern over this, this is not to apply to single family homes.
That's the next page.
And we,
So then for EV charging infrastructure for residential, which would be 1 and 2 family dwellings or townhouses, we would be stipulating a designated attached or detached or other on-site private parking, 1 EV capable space or EV ready space per dwelling unit. So essentially any new home that's built would have to have an EV capable or EV ready charging unit or be capable of having one in the home.
so do the older homes get grandfathered in and they don't have to?
Yes. Mhm.
So if an older home person in a townhome wants to put in an EV, just has a parking space, doesn't have the garage or anything, do they have to pull a permit, and do they have to get permission to do that?
Yeah, if they want to install an EV charging unit in their home, irregardless if they have a parking space or a garage, they'd have to pull a permit. You have to pull a permit for any kind of electrical work of that magnitude.
I have a random, not a random question, but just kind of to help me understand. So to follow all these electric ready provisions, a lot of this are upgraded panels, right?
Mhm.
So how, for a residential home, like, is that larger than like a 200-volt panel, or what kind of upgrade would that look like?
It could be, you know, I'll let the technical expert answer that one.
Normally a 200 amp panel.
Would handle that? Yeah, and that's pretty standard in our current code, right?
Yeah.
I had to do that at my house.
Mhm.
Because I was operating off of 100-volt and lights were flickering. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I expect the code wants more breaker spaces for feeding solar back into the panel.
Right, which makes sense because of just how many more electric things we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for your like larger commercial buildings, you'll need more space for all the EVs that are required, yeah.
Thank
Okay, next slide. So a summary of the comments on the 2024 IECC amendments. And this is where we really kind of get into what we were just discussing. The Kansas Gas Service has expressed opposition to all the amendments. And they provided some information on the cost of compliance with the 2024 IECC as compared to the current 2018 IECC. And that's baseline. So that's without the appendices. That's just the code itself. The costs range from, to be compliant, range from $1,464 up to $5,905 for our region. So we've taken those costs nationally and broken them down to our particular region. They stated to me in a meeting that solar ready and EV ready, electric ready infrastructure are stranded assets, additional building components that will be seldom if ever used. Those are their words. Additional cost for an EV ready home ranges from approximately $250 to $825. Additional cost for an electric ready home can be approximately $825. And then again, this places a kind of an unfair advantage for gas under the Kansas Energy Choice Act. Next slide. And some additional information from the Home Innovation Research Labs, which is a report that was prepared by for the National Home Builders Association. They stated that added cost of the 2024 IEC relative to 2018 IECC to be $1,679 for an electric home or $3,248 for a gas home for our particular climate, which is climate 4. And a lot of the drivers behind this, again, are that continuous wall insulation, more stringent requirements for fenestration or the windows. So the windows have to be more solar resistant, for lack of a better term, kind of resist that UV ray coming through. And then reduce costs for the 2024 IEC relative to the 2021 IEC, which again, as I stated earlier, was a much more aggressive code. There's actually a reduction. So if we kind of go in the opposite direction, there's about $6,704 savings for electric homes or $4,256 savings for gas homes. That's for the construction cost. So the 2021 was very stringent. The 2024 has provided a little bit more flexibility, which has resulted in lower construction costs to be compliant with the 2024.
And Brian, I would just flag that I think that does go to the point that I made, that the code process itself already has a variety of stakeholders, right? So there were some things that were deemed unworkable or too expensive in the 2021 code, and they made those more flexible in the 2024 code.
Yeah, the 2021 code was met with a lot of resistance internally with the IECC stakeholders. So there was a lot of consternation about that. And ultimately, they kind of revisited the 2024 code and backed off some of those stringent requirements. And then the Department of Energy study has determined that there's a 6.6% savings in the actual energy cost from the 2021 IEC to the 2024 IECC.
So in summary, basically there's a higher cost, but a better energy saving. Is that what I'm getting from this? But I'm not
It
understanding.
costs a little bit more, but you're going to save more over the long run.
Yeah, I'm just not understanding the difference between the electric home and the gas home. Why
The
is there?
electric home, you'll have some homes, especially down south, southern part of the United States, that are almost all electric. So it's, electric air conditioner, electric furnace. There's almost no gas at all. Here in the Midwest, it's kind of a combination of gas and electric. So they try to break out those costs between gas and electric. And these are all national costs. So finally, kind of a summary of comments on the 2024 IECC. And Mr. Winger, I'm sure will speak to this in a minute, but he stated that he was generally supportive of sustainability initiatives, but was concerned about the increased construction costs, especially with the proposed appendices. And then we heard from Ms. Randall, who's representing Climate Action KC. She expressed support for the proposed amendments. Ms. Root, who's the chair of the Mission Sustainability Commission, also expressed support for the proposed amendments. And Mr. Thede, who's here this evening, Mission resident, also expressed support for the proposed amendments. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Now we can discuss or want to take comments from the public. Those are here tonight.
Sure. Yeah, we can take public comments, which are limited to 3 minutes a person. So if you want to raise your hand, if you have something to say, yep, come on up, Baron. State your name and city of residence for the record.
Aaron Wingert, Mission. So I come at you as somebody that I spent 15 years as a building codes inspector, codes official for local Johnson County municipalities. I am a commercial builder. I don't come at you as a commercial builder tonight. I come at you as a resident whose house may get struck by lightning and need to be rebuilt someday. I'm also a building commissioning and closure certified professional. So I do this for a living on the commercial end. I believe strongly in the, yes, ma'am.
So basically you're an expert.
I am an expert, not
Okay.
in residential. I'll kind of cross my fingers behind my back. I'm pretty good at residential, but I'm an expert. We're living the 2021 IECC in Kansas City, Missouri. It's probably worth your due diligence to understand or look into what Kansas City, Missouri has gone through as a jurisdiction since implementation of the 2021. They were the canary in the mine for our city, our region, the first to take on an energy code. It was brought about by Energy Lobby. I'm fine with that. They didn't sell a building permit for 6 months. The NAHB took a lot of issues with it. The building community took a lot of issues with it, had a lot of stumbles and challenges. All that being said, they've walked back some of their requirements back in February. I think that's something to learn from as our city goes into adoption of new codes and standards that are similarly aggressive. A lot of the amendments that are being proposed to the IECC, I do take issue with as someone that if I'm rebuilding my home due to a fire or I come into money or whatever, I may not want to put in and spend $1,000 to run a 220 wire that I'm never going to use across my home to my water heater. I would argue that the standard 200 amp panel, we're taking a lot of accommodation out of that panel by prepping for EV for that water heater. An EV takes 2 air conditioners worth of electricity. I'm not opposed to EV. I don't want it in my garage. If I'm pulling a permit to build my home, I feel that, homeowners' rights should dictate that, not what I believe to be government overreach with that code. Like I said, the HERS rating, I fully support wherever Brian went. Thank you, sorry. I fully support the HERS direction that they're going. I think that's a smart move. I don't think it's overly restrictive. It is achievable. The components that go into that are, as Brian said, they're building envelope related, but they're also interrelated. They're insulation related. Is it framed with 2x4s? Every house in the metro area is framed with 2x4s. You're going to end up with 2x6s, or you're going to be hanging insulation on the outside of your home. These are changes that the building community that you all may not be taking into consideration in the name of energy efficiency. These are cost drivers. We're looking at, a couple few $1,000s. We'll make that up in a lumber package alone, complying with that code. Not even talking wiring and conduit. This is an impactful change. And I think it needs to be weighed heavily as to what the city's goals are to sustainability and energy efficiency versus the homeowner's rights to build a home that meets the minimum standard of the code. I've always asserted, I believe in the code. I enforced the code for years. I love the code. I'm a code nerd. Believe in it to my core. The building code is the baseline minimum standard that I can build a home or a commercial structure to. The energy code is a best practices manual. And I feel that the code making panels, Mayor Flora, have confused that through lobby, through advocacy. It's not always the code making is not always the consortium of everyone from the industry. It's lobby. It's heavy lobby. So thank you for giving me your time.
Any other public comments? Yeah, Josh, come on up.
Josh Seedy, I live in Mission, Kansas. I'm very excited, and thank you to staff and thank you to council for considering these new 2024 codes. I think having updated building codes is good for the health and safety of our neighbors, and thinking about the future homeowners that may buy these houses is where we should think. I'm supportive of IECC with no weakening amendments and the proposed appendices as Brian's laid out. Energy efficiency is climate health, and environmental health is directly tied to human health. So I believe it's respectfully that it is part of life safety and human health. As a resident and homeowner here in Mission, I recently had to have this conversation about upgrading my water heater and adding solar panels to my house. And it cost a lot of money to upgrade my panel, to add the new conduit, and more than if somebody had planned it in the first place. It would have been much more cost effective to me, the end resident, to not have all that extra infrastructure cost that should have been in the house in the first place. So if I theoretically bought a new McMansion that is in Mission in 5 years, I would hope that I can choose as a resident to have an electric water heater, to have an electric stove. Even today, I drive an EV, but I still don't have charging in my car garage because the aesthetics of running a wire outside and not having the appropriate conduit in place already is a burden to me as a homeowner. I can't upgrade. I still have a gas stove that I want to upgrade to electric, but the cost and the aesthetics of running new conduit is limiting me right now. So I would hope future homeowners have the choice to have all electric homes if they so choose. Thank you.
All right, anyone online, Justin? Okay, we'll open it up for council questions or discussion. Anything further from the council? I know we kind of talked as we went along too, but.
Yeah, just gathering my thoughts. I'm trying to remember all the amendments that we've gone through and talked about already. I think, well, Brian showed a slide. I think that the Code Council saw the problems really with the 21 Energy Conservation Code, and just the numbers that he had on the screen showed that, you know, the marginal cost of going from 18 to 21 was, you know, much bigger than for going from 18 to 24. And I think part of that is learning some of the lessons from Kansas City, Missouri, and other jurisdictions that had trouble getting those things across the finish line. I think part of probably what held Kansas City, Missouri back is that they stood alone for the most part. But I also agree that the 2024 IECC giving a lot more options and flexibility for how to comply generally, I think was the right move. And I'm supportive of the code and the amendments we've put together. I think generally, the amendments are not asking that much additional cost for new construction, as Mr. Thiede pointed out, relative to what it would take to retrofit homes. And I think that's one of the key things for me in terms of making us resilient and just having flexibility down the road and not locking residents into a situation where they have to do a lot of expensive retrofitting. For me, I think the biggest thing that came out of the feedback from the stakeholder meeting is, again, that I think Kansas Gas Service largely overstated what it would take for us to comply with the Energy Choice Act. And I'm sure I'll talk with Brian about how I think that could be fixed. But the punchline here tonight is I'd like to hear from really somebody in our house, so to speak, on what it takes to comply. So I think there's probably a happy medium.
Any other comments? Yeah, Debbie?
I'd like to know, just down the line, if those of us who have older homes, my house was built in 1946, how are we getting more energy efficiency on fireplaces? You know, based on the making of it, the materials, the way air goes in, out, etc. I wish we had like a meeting to kind of go through some of those things for those of us who are looking at possibly doing updating on houses and retrofitting. I think that would be real helpful. I may deviate from what we're doing here, but I think that's something that people would like to know about.
Brian, I have a weird question about pervious and impervious paving, since you did have the slide point on that. And just a potential note of caution. I I served on another city's planning commission for a while where there were a lot of architects and builders on that planning commission. And so my question is, are we planning to count pervious pavers as pervious surface in our lot coverage calculations? Because they had a lot of concern about that and would not actually allow that in their city, because if they aren't properly managed and maintained, they become impervious, is my understanding. If they aren't properly installed and if they aren't maintained correctly. And so then you can cause stormwater problems if you're counting them as pervious for lot total coverage purposes.
That's really getting into the weeds.
It is very into the weeds, but you brought up the bullet point. I was going to ask the question, and I wasn't sure if we're just saying that we allow them and that's the change in the code, or if we are planning to count that as pervious in our lot coverage, or do we not know yet?
I don't think we really know yet. My intent was simply to allow pervious surface as kind of an alternative to the
Okay.
traditional concrete
Yep.
driveway, to allow for that, additional capturing of stormwater and not just letting it run off into the street or
Yep.
into the yard. But you start to bring up good questions, and I'm thinking in particular about our stormwater utility tax. Because everything's based on kind of a standard residential, I think it's 2,100 square feet or something like that, of pervious surface, which is kind of the standard residential home admission. And that includes the roof, the patio, the driveway, and you start adjusting that, you start seeing a lot of that around town. You may have to kind of reconsider, readjust that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there are some that question whether long-term it really stays
Yeah.
pervious. So maybe it's good to allow it, but not
Yeah.
like count it as
Yeah.
pervious for those
But in
calculations.
terms of-
Just something to think about as we're also up.
In terms of lot coverage, you're really starting to get into more zoning.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of,
side, and-
looking at our other codes,
Yeah.
maybe.
And I think
Note of
the
caution.
driveway is a driveway, whether it's pervious or impervious,
Yeah.
so in terms of lot coverage.
Yeah, could I offer a thought on that? I think a lot of the building systems we rely on and we write codes and ordinances around all require maintenance and upkeep, and I think a lot of them tend to degrade similarly when they're sort of just left to sit and rot over time. I mean, I'm thinking when you think of stormwater runoff and things like this, it's, people putting up awnings and shade sails, and the little pipe falls off of their sump pump, drain, and it's spewing into who knows where. So I think part of the code that looks at how should the site be designed should honor, the intent of the material. And then when we think about how do you maintain a site and make it function as it's supposed to, that's, to me, kind of a separate concern that we deal with under property maintenance and nuisance codes and things. But I would like to give things like that the benefit of the doubt and assume that, maintenance is probably going to affect the performance of a lot of the things that we ask people to do. So that's my take.
Yeah, Cheryl, then Wanda.
So we have two homes associations that are very active in mission. And what is the process going to be going forward in working with them as these codes? Because they have some, guidelines that are a little bit more stringent than the city codes, but some of these would definitely impact them once they're adopted.
Don't really know if any of the proposed building codes are going to have an impact on the homeowners associations. Again, a lot of the covenants, the homeowners associations gets more back to setbacks and fence requirements and things like that, as opposed to what's in the building codes.
I'm just thinking some of the things we've talked about with EVs and all that.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think the covenants or the homeowners association rules, the couple that I know of really have any bearing on EV cars or not. If somebody wants to put an EV charging station, I don't think there's a covenant that says you can't do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Wanda's in next.
Yeah, my question was, there was some discussion about credits from the gas company. Can you tell me what that's about? I'm not sure what that is.
Perhaps for the 90 and 95% efficiency furnaces in the climate zone 4, the credits that you give for those.
That's what we just got.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's,
Tax credits?
It's credits towards compliance with the Energy Conservation Code, if I remember right, and I'll frame their argument as best I can from their point of view. Not offering the credits as they recommend in their submittal, they feel sort of biases the process, the IECC calculation processes against the use of gas. And so I think they wanted to just adjust which climate zones and which exact numbers of credits are available for certain types of furnaces in order to comply with the Energy Conservation Code to make it essentially easier for gas furnaces to comply.
Not equitable.
I think it's almost so hard to figure out, is there equitable or discrimination in there? They're very different systems, and at some point we're just saying you have to be X amount efficient. What that means for a gas furnace versus a heat pump versus a wood stove is sort of wildly different. I don't know that I could come up with a reasonable opinion as to whether that discriminates against gas or for gas or none of the above. So that one confused me a bit.
What he said.
Okay, any final thoughts, comments? This will be back in front of us at committee, Brian?
Correct, yeah. So our intent right now, I'm not really hearing any changes that you want to make to what we proposed in the ordinances, the amendments. So our intent right now, we'll check with legal about compliance with the Kansas Energy Choice Act. But what I'm hearing right now is pretty much status quo. And so our intent would be to bring back all the ordinances to the July 8th CDC meeting for a final review. And
I would say I sense a little bit of difference among the dais here. My main holdup is, yes, let's preemptively get our own counsel as to what complies with the Energy Choice Act.
Well,
I don't know, maybe there's some more concerns.
Well, and I think too, right, as you mentioned, we are voting on these things individually, right? The
Right.
different pieces individually.
yeah, you'll have
So people have an opportunity to vote.
12 ordinances for each code and
So-
yeah, or one for each code. Yeah, there'll be 12 ordinances total.
Okay. All right, anything else? If not, that concludes our work session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.